I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make Snowman Macarons, and this is what they look like. Aren't these too cute? So what we have is 2 almond flavored cookies sandwiched together with a peppermint flavored chocolate ganache, and then we're going to decorate them to make them look like snowmen. The first thing we need to do is to make a template, and the reason I do that is because obviously we want all our snowmen to be the same size and shape. So take a piece of parchment paper, and then you will need 2 round cookie cutters. I'm using one that's 1.5 inches and the other one is 1 inch. So that's 3 3/4 and 2.5 centimeters. And then you need a felt pen, and then what I do is just put that down, draw my circle, and then put the other one, draw my circle. And what I've done here is done 4 rows of 4. For the amount of meringue we're making, you will need 3 baking sheets lined with parchment. And what you do is you take your template, you put it like that, and then the parchment paper over it. And I use the felt marker so you can see through. And then once you pipe one, what we're just going to do is just flip that out and then use it for the next sheet. So you don't have to make 3 templates. So now, basically a macaron is a almond flavored meringue. It can be a little tricky, and because of that, you really want to make sure that all your ingredients, you have the right amount. So I strongly, strongly recommend that you weigh your ingredients here. You know, just have a small digital scale. They're not too expensive anymore. Just buy them online. So now, the first thing, you will need 100 grams, which is 1 cup of ground blanched almonds. Now, I just buy them. You can buy them now in most grocery stores, usually either on the baking aisle or oftentimes in the health food section or online. If you can't find them, you can just take like whole blanched almonds and then just process them in your food processor. It's the other way. So just put that in here, along with 180 grams, which is 1.5 cups of confectioner sugar. You may know that as powdered or icing sugar. I'm just going to pop that in there. And then I'm going to process this probably for at least a minute. I want to mix the 2 ingredients all together, and the other thing is I want to make sure that those ground almonds are really ground, because for a macaron, you want a really smooth texture. You don't want any like grittiness from the almonds, so that's why I'm processing it again. Okay, I think that'll be enough. So now what I'm going to do is to sift our mixture. Again, if there's any little pieces of almond, we want to get that out. Now I'm just going to sift right onto parchment paper. You could do it into a bowl if you like. And I'm just using actually a strainer. You can, if you have a sifter, an actual sifter, you can use that. Okay. And then once that's done, I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to clean up and set up, and I'll be right back and we will make our meringue. So now for our meringue. If you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your whisk attachment, or else you could use a hand mixer for this. And of course, meringue, you need egg whites. Now, I like to use what is called aged egg whites. Really what that means is either the day before or really up to 5 days ahead. What I do is separate my eggs, take my egg whites, put them in a bowl, and then cover it with either like cheese, I'm using cheesecloth, you could just use like a paper towel, and then just put them into the fridge, at least overnight, and you have aged egg whites. And then make sure you bring your egg whites to room temperature before you start making your meringue. And then what we will, okay, I'm just going to put that right in there. And that, okay, I'm going to say, you need 100 grams of aged egg whites. So that means what I usually separate 4 large eggs, and then like I age them overnight. The next day, that is when I weigh them to get 100 grams. And then you will need 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Now, I use that to stabilize the egg whites, and also it really prevents you from over whipping them, which is a good thing. Usually you can find it on the baking aisle, like where all the other spices are. If you can't find it, you can just leave it out, or you could use 1/4 teaspoon of just lemon juice. And then you will also need, we're not going to add that right away, you will need 35 grams, which is 2½ tablespoons of, I like to use super fine sugar because it dissolves easier into the meringue. And I don't buy it. What I do is just take 35 grams of granulated white sugar and just process it in my food processor for a little bit, and it's finely ground. So that's what I use. So now what we're going to do first is we're going to put our mixer on medium-low and just beat our egg whites until you have soft peaks, and I will show you what that looks like. Okay, that looks good. The way I tell when I've beaten this enough is you can start, when your mixer's going, you can start to see the tracks of the whisk in the meringue. So really at this point it's just really foamy, I would say. So that's, and it kind of has, like that, just kind of peaks it. It kind of has peaks, but they don't hold. So now I'm going to put the mixer up to almost high speed, and I'm going to gradually add my sugar. A little, like I'm going to add maybe a tablespoon. Mix that in and then keep it mixing. And this is going to be transformed like magic into this billowy, I mean, shiny, glossy, and we want stiff peaks. So. I think it's done, so we will give it a check. So how I check it is give yourself a really good stir, and then that's what you want. Straight up, like it doesn't kind of, when you take it out, it doesn't then flip over like a beak. You want it straight up. So we're done. Kind of amazing how you take some egg whites and then it ends up like this. So you could mix your dry ingredients right into this bowl, but you know what? I prefer using a wide and shallow mixing bowl for this. I find it much easier to see what I'm doing. Okay. So now, oh, it's beautiful. I'm not going to add all my dry ingredients at once. I'm just going to take maybe 1/3. And then I'm using a large spatula. I'm just going to mix that in. It's cut through over. Okay. And once you've got it mixed in, add a little more. And again, up and over and around. Okay, I'm just going to scrape off. Sometimes the dry ingredients kind of stick to your spatula. And then dump the rest in. You want to get a little air out of your meringue. It's kind of different. Usually you go, oh, I don't want to get any air out of my meringue when you're making it. For this, yes, you do. So if you saw, I'm kind of, let's get this scraped off again. I'm kind of the odd time like flattening in it like that. So. This is a part that does, you know, take a little bit of practice. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So what you want, I'm just going to a little more air out of that. You want it in a ribbon, yeah, like that. That's about what you're looking for, okay? I know it may look easy, and you know, if you have to take a few times to get this right, really be kind to yourself. It's a tough thing. That's why these, if you go to a bakery, they're so expensive, because the technique is can be a little difficult. So now we're going to pipe our meringue. So I have a large pastry bag, and I have a 1/2 inch, it's about 1 centimeter, plain tip. That's, I'm using actually a Wilton 1A. And then what I do is I put it in, and then, because I want to put the meringue in there and I don't want it to come out the end. So what I do is I take my bag and I twist it, and then I kind of stick it in there, and that way I can get it in without it coming out the other end. If you want, you could even put your, if you find it easier, especially if you're not used to piping and that, you can just put it into a glass and then put your meringue, if that's easier for you. Whatever's easier. You'll find your own way of doing this. And so now, take my bag, and then I'm just going to put it on my counter, and then if you have some kind of scraper, or just some kind of flat edge, I'm just going to, and then open your bag. You want to make sure you get all, the air out of your meringue. Otherwise, if you've had that when you pipe and you go pop, little air bubble. It happens to us all. Okay, that looks good. Okay, I think I'm ready. So now, I'm going to take my, I have that underneath and this over top. What I'm going to do is just make sure, and then press it down and then twist it. And then I can let that up and till it starts. And I mean, you can do this however you want. When you're piping, don't pipe all the way to the end of the circle, because your meringue is going to spread a little bit. So stop a little, and then I'm just piping straight down. And then stop, and then in the other circle, and then make sure they're just touching. And you just do that for the whole sheet. Okay, so I'm just going to turn my bag upside down like that, and whoop, stay there, and like that, and then you can do that for your second sheet. And then what you want to do is take your pan and bang it, and if you, that should get rid of any air bubbles. You can also just take a little toothpick and pop any air bubbles. So what I'm going to do is just carry on, and then once I've done all of, I at least get 2.5 maybe sheets. What you want to do is we have to let these sit at room temperature for at least 30 minutes, maybe an hour, until when you touch them, they're no longer tacky. And then towards the end of that, you want to preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 165 degrees Celsius, with your baking sheet in the center. So that's what you're going to do. I'm just going to finish that off and then just let them sit for half an hour. And then when we come back, we will be ready to bake our macarons. So while our meringues are drying out, I decided why not make our ganache. So in a heat-proof bowl, I'm using stainless steel, you will need 3 ounces, which is 85 grams, of either a semi-sweet or a bittersweet chocolate. Now you want to use a good quality chocolate, one that you would just enjoy eating on its own. If you can use the discs, but you know, kind of coarsely chop it up if you're, say, using a chocolate bar. And then in a sauce, just a small saucepan, you will need 1/4 cup, 60 milliliters of heavy whipping cream, and that's cream with about 35–40% butterfat content. And then I'm adding 1 tablespoon, 13 grams of butter. Cut it into small pieces just so it will melt faster. And I'm just going to put that over like medium heat. Bring it up, just up to a boil. It'll just start to foam up. Watch it carefully. Okay, as you can see the bubbles, and it's just starting to foam up. So quickly get it off the heat and then pour it over our chocolate. And then I'm going to add, now this can vary depending on how minty you want your ganache to be. I'm using actually peppermint oil. Peppermint oil is a lot stronger than if you used pure peppermint extract, but I love that kind of icy kind of, you know, flavor when you use an oil. So I do recommend that, but you know, usually you have to order it online. So if you want, you can use the pure peppermint extract. Now for the oil, it's very strong. So I'm only going to add, I like a bit of a peppermint. I don't like it too strong of a peppermint flavor. So I'm only going to add like maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon here, if I can. Yeah. If you're using peppermint extract, you probably want to use about double, like I would say almost 1/4 of a teaspoon, because like I said, it's not as strong as the oil. So I'm just going to, oh, I can smell it already. So just kind of swirl that, and I'm just going to let that sit like maybe a minute for the hot cream to melt the chocolate. So now what I'm going to do, I'm using a whisk. You could just use a spoon. I'm just going to start in the center, and just going to get that all mixed together. Now it's going to be pretty fluid once we finish here. As you can already see, it's pretty fluid. So what I'm going to do, and that's why I made it early, you could actually make this like the day before. I'm going to cover it, and then I'm just going to let it sit at room temperature, and it will become firm because we're going to use this to sandwich our 2 cookies together. So you want it thick enough, and right now you can see it's pretty thin. But after about maybe 1, maybe 2 hours, it'll become nice and thick. So that's our chocolate ganache. So we are now ready to bake our meringue cookies. So what you want is when you touch it, it's no longer tacky. And how long that takes depends on the humidity of your kitchen. For example, right now I'm sitting at about 41% humidity in my kitchen, and so it took about 25 minutes, 25–30 minutes. So if you're in a really humid climate, I mean, you may have to let them sit an hour, 2 hours. So if you can figure out the humidity of your kitchen, it will kind of give you an idea how long these are going to take to dry out. So now for baking. Macarons are kind of unique. And because as they bake, they kind of rise up, get a flat top, and as you can see, they get like a little ruffle on the bottom. That's called a foot, and that's what we want. that's kind of how you're going to be judged, whether you made a good macaron or not. And so your oven temperature will affect that. So if your first batch, you don't get a nice foot, you may have to adjust your oven temperature. But I find for me around 325 Fahrenheit, 165 Celsius is good. And for this size, I take maybe 14 to 16 minutes. So they will rise, so you're gonna get that nice foot. And when you kind of try to lift one off of the sheet, it just starts to separate from the parchment paper. And I do like to rotate my baking sheet front to back about halfway through baking, just to make sure it's nice even baking. So I'm going to say like 14 to 16 minutes. Okay, so our first tray of our snowmen is done, and they do all have feet. You know, one of the big things when you're making these is you're kind of nervous, and you're looking in the oven just to make sure they rise and they have the feet, but mine do. And just barely start to take them away from the parchment paper. So I'm just going to I put the baking sheet on a wire rack. I'm going to let them cool a little on there. Just for reference, because I made these yesterday and I actually got almost 3 sheets, but obviously today I only got 2 sheets. So I guess I made my snowman a little bigger today. So just for reference. So I'm going to bake off my second sheet now, and then we will take these ones off of the tray. So I let them cool, you know, 3-4 minutes, and then I'm using an offset spatula. You could just use any straight edge. And what I do is I just take it and then just slide it right under like that, and put it on my wire rack to finish cooling. So just do that for the rest. So we're now ready to decorate our snowmen and then sandwich them together. The first thing, if you're like me, I don't pipe totally evenly, so my cookies can vary a little bit. So what I do is just go through and match up ones that are about the same size, like I've done here. And then we have our chocolate ganache, as you can see, did thicken nicely. So that's what you're looking for. And I have I'm going to put it in 2 piping bags. One, I'm putting just a little tiny tip. It's a Wilton number 3. I'm going to just put a little bit of ganache in there, and that's what we're going to use to pipe on the eyes. And then I'll just put the remaining ganache in another piping bag with about a 1/4 inch plain tip. That's about 1/2 centimeter. And that's what I'm going to use to sandwich the 2 cookies together. But first, the eyes. So just, you know, stir it up. You want it like this. This is thick enough to sandwich the 2 cookies together. And I don't need a lot in here for the eyes. And if you wanted to, I don't bother. You could also use this to make, if you wanted to make like buttons down on the tummy of the snowman, you could do that. But today, I'm just going to do eyes. Oh, get scraper, just get it all down the end. Okay, and this, I'm going to make sure, try to get the air bubbles out, twist it. And then, now I'm only going to do it on one. I mean, if you want to have the front and the back looking like have a face and all that, you can decorate both, but I'm not, because I don't, when I make a snowman, I only do the front. So you just want to do a little dot for the eyes, like that. I'm just going to go through and do them all. So I finished piping all the eyes. Now, if you found that when you're piping you have a little bit of a tail, you can just take, you know, a toothpick and just kind of tamp that down. And then, So if we have to do the nose and the scarf, so I'm going to use just a confectioner kind of frosting glaze. So I have a half a cup, 60 grams of confectioner sugar. You may know that as powdered or icing. I did sift it. And then I'm just going to add enough, either you could just use cream or milk, just to get it nice, like to the right consistency so I can pipe on that, you know, the little nose and the scarf. So I'm going to start with not quite a tablespoon. It's easier to add than take away, right? Although you could always, if you kind of made it too thin, you could just add some more sugar. And then you will need some food coloring. I'm using the gel orange for the nose because I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I always used a carrot when I was making snowmen for the nose. Although, you know, you could actually use the chocolate ganache for the nose, because way back when you had coal, you could actually use coal for the nose too. So you could use a chocolate ganache, but we'll make it colorful and do it orange. A little more there. And then I'm going to use blue for my scarf. You can do that whatever color you want. Now you don't need very much for the nose, so I just have a bowl. I'm just gonna put, might be a little thick, but I'll start with that. Probably be more than enough. And then that. And then I'm just gonna squeeze some in. Stir it in. Yeah, that's going to be bright. Okay, and that's our orange. So I'm going to put that in a piping bag fitted with like a really small plain tip. This is, I think, you want to either use a Wilton number 3 or a Wilton number 4, whatever you have. Or if you don't have all kinds of piping tips, you can just put it into like a plastic bag and then just cut off the tip just a little. Close that up. It'll get a skin pretty fast if you don't cover it. And then to the remaining, I'm going to add my blue from my scarf. I think that's going to be bright. I'm going to start with the nose. So, if you want to practice, you know, now you can really pipe this however you want. Okay, looks good. I'm just doing like a little streak for the carrot. And just do that on all of them. Okay, so now we've got all the noses done. So let's do the scarf. So I've got my blue, and what I do is just right across the neck here. And then I go down and down. You can do it however you want, but that's how I do it. So now we've got all the eyes, nose, and the scarf. Don't they look cute? So you want to let those dry, that icing to dry. And then what you do is you take your second cookie and turn it upside down, and then we put that ganache in our bag with the plain tip. I mean, you could just, you don't have to pipe it, but I find it a lot faster. Then just put some ganache on there. Take your cute little cookie and gently press down. And there we have our Snowman Macaron. I don't know about you, but these are, to me, they're just so adorable. Now, personally, I like to, what you call mature my macarons, over, at least overnight. So what I do is, I'm going to put them all and then put them in a container and put them in the fridge. And I find they just taste better. You know, the ganache, I find, tastes better after a day, and then everything, the cookies all kind of meld together, and it's so good. And you can actually store these if you were room temperature only a couple days, but I find 4 or 5 days, maybe 6 in the refrigerator, so it's something you can make ahead. And I'm going to try one because I made these yesterday because, like I said, I do like them to mature overnight. I like them cold. Actually, sometimes I freeze them and I'll eat them right out of the freezer. Okay, maybe I shouldn't, but I do. Or you can let them come to room temperature, whatever you like. I'm just going to rip off the head. These are worth the work. The almond, you get that the almond flavor. They're soft, they're chewy, and with that mint flavored ganache, I like the combination. Very Christmassy, I mean mint. These would make a fantastic gift. I mean, if you've ever seen these in the store, they're a lot of money. So you could just box them, get pretty boxes, put them in there, and you know what? People will be really impressed with that. So try these. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.